Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Peyton Marshall. Peyton served in a number of product management, sales, and C-suite roles in the financial services, biopharmaceuticals, healthcare IT, and B2B sales and marketing software spaces. As CEO of LeveragePoint, he has worked with a number of world-class companies to address their product management, marketing, and sales challenges. So with that, Peyton, welcome.
Thanks, Nick. And thank you all for joining. Today's webinar is a topic where we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of interest, and it's really all about offer design, which has gotten a lot of attention. If you saw Rafi Mohammed's Harvard Business Review piece last year, that's an interesting place to start. More specifically, it's about bundles. And it's interesting that as you talk to economists, as you talk to pricing professionals, you hear this word bundle a lot. It's about putting products and services together and thinking about the pricing strategy for them. The more you talk about that, however, around antitrust lawyers, the more problematic that term is. And so while there are a lot of things in common here, we're going to avoid the word bundles for the most part in today's webinar and really talk instead about what most other companies think about, which is selling packaged systems and solutions. The reality is great B2B enterprises no longer sell product features. They enable buyers to obtain business outcomes. And those outcomes are often delivered as packaged solutions. So offer design is becoming very important, and there are really three reasons that packaged solutions are trending and why people are thinking about this in deeper consideration. The first is complexity, where what we have is a proliferation of products and services, more and more of them available. That then means that as you try and put them together, as you try and configure good solutions, that complexity really gets accentuated. But it's made worse by the fact that your audiences are changing, that fundamentally you're selling to committees. Where in 2016, Brent Adamson highlighted that 6.8 is the average number of stakeholders involved in a purchasing decision. And I think we all think the number's gone up since then. The second reason that packages are important is the rise of services and the overall overwhelming importance of services. A recent McKinsey Global Institute report found that global services are about 2/3 of GDP, half of all jobs. In the US, it's even more highly concentrated with 80% of GDP. And when it comes to international trade, if you do the math based on true value added, we're finally at that tipping point where the trade in international services is greater than the international goods trade. What does all that mean? It means that services come up everywhere. We've got software as a service. We've got platforms as a service. We've got infrastructure as a service. The Internet of Things is often delivered by means of some services and portals that support users of things. We have data services, and all those go along with the more traditional types of services like installation, preventive maintenance, and support and training. So as services come to predominate in the economy, what becomes more and more important is thinking about the right way to combine goods and services to deliver customer outcomes or customer success. The third reason that packages are important is M&A. In a recent survey by Deloitte of M&A executives, they found that the most important driver of M&A strategy was expanding the customer base. That was a 20% answer. Expanding and diversifying products or services, a close second. And finally, acquiring next year's or the year after's products and services by getting technology. So it's no surprise that the big post-merger integration themes are product or product and service portfolio management, because how do you put all these things together? It's a 360 view of the customer and getting a fundamentally better perspective on customers and customer data. Then it's about synergies, and synergies on the cost side that include sales cost synergies, as well as service and support cost synergies. Now, it's interesting as we move into this conversation about packaging and bundling that there are several knee-jerk reactions or attitudes that result in failure. And we might as well put them forward up front. The first one is this biased view of solution selling, that a solution is just adding stuff up. It's about cramming products and services into a shopping cart and using the adding machine to get to an answer. If you actually think about a good solutions do more than that. And they're really not just about a menu to add things up, but they're about combining things and combining products and services in the right way. The second attitude is that bundles are a way to take advantage of buyers. It's almost the move toward a black box is a good way to play a good shell game. That's an attitude that clearly shows that transparency may not be the most important aspect of someone's relationship with their customers. And I think clearly in a world where collaborating with customers is becoming more and more important, it's an attitude that just gets in the way of designing good solutions. Finally, I think there's the inside view, and you sometimes see it in pricing, you sometimes see it in finance, that bundles are a bad sales habit that provide discounts. And what I think we're going to see is that packages and package solutions don't necessarily need to lead to discounts, and they're often a good way to drive your pricing strategy. So, in what follows, I'll ask you to park your biases about solutions. And what we're really going to try and do is make rational decisions, or at least provide a framework for doing that. Because setting up package solutions is a lot like organizing a restaurant, where what you're really out to do is make deliberate choices in designing your offering. And your offerings vary between an a la carte menu and potential prefix solutions, where good B2B commercial organizations partner with their customers to design the most profitable menu, but also design the right systems, a combination of products, and solutions, a combination of products and services that drive their own customers' outcomes. So, beyond a la carte products and services, why package? There are 6 good reasons to use package systems and solutions. The first is to simplify buyer choice, to come up with 2, 3, 4 natural packages that help simplify decisions about what configuration the customer can and should buy. The second one is a little bit more on the kind of economic theory end of the spectrum, but there's some common sense, and that's to increase buyer share and demand. So that by designing systems and solutions, what you've got are new alternatives that make buyer value more homogeneous or induce the earlier purchase of a new product. The third is a classic reason to think about packages, and that's really to address buyer segments, where you're designing packaged offerings to create fences or maybe other kinds of barriers where different customers purchase different packages based on the underlying value. The fourth, capitalize on buyer synergies. A synergy is where the value of a package is greater than the sum of the value of its components. The fifth one is a really important one, and I think it's getting increasing attention, that a package solution can be a good basis to move towards new and improved price metrics. And those price metrics can be better aligned to value. And the last one, naturally following our mention of the M&A theme, it's to capitalize on cost synergies. That by looking at packages and package solutions, you may be integrating the sale and delivery of products and services, and that reduces the cost to deliver them. For B2B offer design and execution, there's one theme that we'll keep coming back to, and that is that value tools are useful as you think about the alternatives. Value tools help you design better packages by understanding your product's positioning, by identifying value-based segments, by helping to choose strong combinations. Value tools can help price for higher profits. Dollarizing differentiation value, setting and defending value-based prices is important, but those packages can help you set pricing that help you extract segment value. And third, selling packages effectively, helping buyers to choose the right specific solutions that deliver outcomes for them, and then value propositions as a more effective means to have a collaborative sales conversation with buyers and buyer stakeholders. So let's go through each of these in a little more detail, and we'll start with simplicity. There's snow on Walden Pond today, but that doesn't mean that Thoreau wouldn't continue to say, simplify, simplify. And at one level, having simpler packages is just common sense. Simpler is better. In B2B, what you often find as well, though, is simplicity actually helps to reduce buyer risk. That is, there's a lot of pressure on a buyer decision maker in choosing between different combinations of products and services. So a package can be, and a recommended package can be, a way to improve alignment between the seller and the buyer. In improving that alignment, that recommended package may transfer some risk in the sense that the recommendation is really about the right combination of products and services to deliver an outcome. But that's inevitable in a world where outcomes are the important element of what we all sell. And so it's natural to think of a simplified package really as a good way to reduce buyer risk and increase alignment. Third, a package can actually help position a price or pricing that satisfies buyer shopping requirements. We've all seen buyers who go back to their internal finance stakeholders and need to defend that they got a decent price on what they bought. Procurement naturally helps them. So that what you sometimes see in the way packages are structured is that a premium price package, let's just call it platinum, makes it easier for a buyer to accept the gold price and choose gold. At the end of the day, we saved money versus the more expensive alternative and managed to deliver the outcomes that we're out to achieve. And finally, and I'll say a bit more about this, it's about addressing some buyer types. So in the many editions of the strategy and tactics of pricing, this 2x2 grid appears, where along the x-axis, we've got the cost of search from low to high. Along the y-axis, we've got the importance of differentiation from low to high, where your value-driven buyers are the low cost of search, so they're going in and thinking about the math and doing the quantification, but they do care about differentiation. Our price-driven buyers are low cost of search. They're really nailing things down, and maybe they're less concerned about differentiation. But then over here at the higher cost of search end, we've got brand-driven buyers where they, again, are cognizant of differentiation, but may do a little less work to sort of get to a decision, and convenience-driven buyers. And what's interesting as you look at that grid is that package solutions are especially suitable for the brand-driven and the convenience-driven buyers. They're the ones whose cost of search is high. So that thinking about all this, having simplicity naturally addresses some buyer types. The implications, if you're thinking about simplicity as a reason to package, is first that pricing pages, prices lists, and marketing focus on package systems and solutions still make fundamental sense. That it's natural to introduce a product or a differentiated set of products and services in a package that starts with these buyers. You can always migrate to the left by having a la carte pricing available or available on request. This is a case of what economists call mixed bundling, where both bundles are offered and a la carte offerings are made available as well. What's interesting is, at least when you're comparing to a competitor, the competitor faces the same issues as the buyer. So that when you think about this as a reason for packaging, it's actually neutral in terms of whether a package price should be higher than or lower than a la carte prices that add up to the package. Packaging reason number 2, to increase demand. It's a little known fact that Ron Wood trained in art before he became the Rolling Stones guitarist by way of Jeff Beck and other bands. And so that his first real money-making venture in art was by doing album covers. No surprise, putting what he was known for, music, together with his art. Now, as he evolved, he began to actually sell paintings separately, as you can see, interview at his art show. But it's interesting that he's an example of thinking about a package solution really as a way to increase demand. Now, there's common sense here, and that's discounting for volume. Just like with a single product or a single service, you'd probably face a downward sloping demand curve. Buyers purchasing across products and services provided by one seller are likelier to purchase more. The other way to think about that is just discounting for share of wallet or brand loyalty. The economists get into this and have a fair amount of theory behind it. And without kind of going into the math here, the economic argument's really based on fundamental consumer theory, where the important element is that the package is an additional choice for buyers. And economists would say, additional choice, always good. So their theory in coming to this is based on really thinking about the probability distribution of customer evaluations, where packages provide buyer choices that are distinct from the a la carte choices, where, and this is a lot like portfolio theory, where variations or dispersion in buyer evaluation for individual products can actually be reduced. It's the same thing as reducing the variance in a portfolio almost by combining them. So that what you've really got in this world is the discounted packages address buyers who would not buy a la carte. That theory has been extended to think about buyers over time. And an interesting recent piece on this that's a Harvard Business School working paper, really highlights that buyers may purchase some products earlier if there's a packaged offer. So the implications when you're thinking about increasing demand as your reason to package is, first, it naturally makes sense to offer products and services a la carte as well as on a prefix package basis. So again, we've got an instance of mixed bundling. There is a possible sequential approach. And again, Rafi Mohammed highlighted this in his PhD thesis, which is it can actually make sense to offer packages first. The example he uses is concert tickets, where offering season tickets can induce, and only season tickets early on, can induce buyers to pay more for concerts that they wouldn't necessarily go to, where then you take up the extra demand at the end by offering tickets in smaller lots. So the other implication here is that package pricing, at least when you're out to increase demand, is usually discounted versus a la carte pricing. And the only exception to that is really when you're doing things sequentially. So let's move to number 3, a classic reason to package in pricing, and that's to segment. Good fences make good neighbors, and setting up value-based packages can help create fences, or at least, let's just say, low stone walls between buyers of different categories. So that's also been highlighted in the Strategy and Tactics of Pricing, where Nagel and his various co-authors over the years have focused on value-based segments, where it's about pricing differently based on value, where potentially you would target high-value buyers with packages that focus them on high-value combinations. You might increase demand among low-value buyers with discounted packages that really fit them better. And even the idea of selective uglification, I think is the word that's used, that gets at the idea of combining, and you see this in chemical formulations and other places, but combining certain products that would only appeal to low-value buyers as a way to create fences between the different segments. So as we think about value-based segmentation, what we would do is we would think about first, consider the identity and businesses that your customers are in. Think about their problems and objectives, and think about the decisions they make. And in our November webinar last year, we explored this in greater detail. I'd refer you to our white paper on this. But in looking at the identity of customers and their businesses, clearly there are a number of dimensions. It's their business line or their business positioning. It may be their geography, where New England apple growers are different from Oregon apple growers, or Northern California almond farmers are different from Southern California almond farmers. It can be about their operating practices. So where some people are operating a production line in one way, other people are operating it in a different way. And always it can be about their scale, perhaps some of their underlying operating metrics. Those can actually become ways that you begin to think about segments. The big way to think about segmentation is to really get to customers' problems and pain points, where some problems resonate with some customers and not with others. And it may have to do with some of their circumstances up here as well. The flip side here is that sometimes customers have different objectives and goals. So that designing for those different segments may make a lot of sense. And finally, there are the decisions that customers make and that you're asking them to make. It may be about what their use case is for your solution, and you may be pricing and looking at value differently depending on those use cases. Happens all the time in software. It may be about the timing of their decision or how they're organized to actually implement your solution. And finally, there may be reference alternative differences, where some people are comparing you to the status quo, others may be comparing you against a direct competitor, or sometimes the same customer may be thinking about both things at different points in the sales cycle. So as you think about those decisions, then you're really providing different choices to customers among your offerings. The implications as you're thinking about value-based segments and segments as a reason to package are, first, you really here are more likely to be focused on packages, but some of your products and services, and it's just fine if you thought about this selectively to continue to offer them a la carte. So this may be a case of mixed bundling. What you're usually finding here as well is that package pricing is usually discounted versus the sum of a la carte prices. Number 4, buyer synergies, where the value of a package is greater than the sum of the value of components. It's when things work together harmoniously, according to Mark Twain. And it's really where the combination is worth more than in terms of value than its components would be separately. In terms of synergistic or complementary products, and we'll look at services in a minute, What you often have are software modules that fit within a platform. Clearly, within that platform, they're synergistic. You often have equipment that integrates with other equipment by the same producer. You have equipment that goes with disposables, razors and blades. You have equipment that goes with spare parts. In crop protection, as we'll see in an example in a minute, you may have seed traits or types of seed that may be complementary with crop protection products. You may, in healthcare, have drugs that are really more useful and better tested in combination with other drugs. All of those are cases where products together result in synergies. And it's very important when you have synergies that you communicate the combined value of the system. The same thing applies in services, where you have synergistic services, installation and training services, for example, where they may work well together. Maintenance and support services, again, where you may have complementarity. And then finally, when you're in packaged solutions, you have product and service combinations where there may be effects. So for example, data and information services that are more useful through your portal or your software. Maintenance services that are more valuable for your own equipment. And there may be a direct relationship between buying your maintenance services from the equipment vendor and the life of that equipment. Services that make your product customers more successful, training services. So these kind of synergies are all over the place. And I think it's important to look at them and identify them, because when you have these synergies, it's about clear communication of the combined value. So the implications. First, this is really a situation where your primary emphasis is in moving towards products and services being offered as a package. So this is an instance where pure bundling, if you can get to it, may have lots of advantages. Because if all you're offering is the bundle, that means it's eminently possible and reasonable to price at a premium. So this is a situation where those potential a la carte prices are not necessarily the limiting factor in putting things together. Now, clearly there are constraints on getting to this. Those constraints are sometimes based on the history of how pre-existing products or services have been offered. But if you're looking at introducing a disruptive solution, thinking carefully about those synergies, if you can, before you put it on the market, may actually lead you towards only offering packages as you go, if there are strong synergies. Reason number 5, aligning price metrics. A price metric is a unit to which price is applied and doing the math on what the customer pays. And traditional metrics are usually or often volume-based, whether they're pounds or liters, or maybe they're parts and labor, but they're usually related to the volumes of what is sold. Albert Einstein can be a little mystical, but here's a pretty good quote. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And what you're looking for here is what counts, even if that's not necessarily what you were counting before. So package your price metrics to align with benefits and value. Think about new price metrics that involve trade-offs, because good price metrics, and again, this is from the strategy and tactics of pricing, track with differences across in value across segments, differences in cost to serve. They're easy to measure and enforce. They facilitate favorable positioning versus the competition, and they align with how buyers experience value and use. So always good to think about those criteria with packages the same way you would if you were thinking about introducing a new good. Because solutions really are a way to introduce value-aligned metrics. Now that's a hot topic these days. And the hot topic is really that we're moving to a world where there are more and more performance or outcome-based metrics that are being applied. And some of those are ex-ante, so you know your price before you sell the product, but increasingly that's ex-post. It's actually based on outcomes delivered, where ex-post metrics share both risk and reward. We were talking to Todd Snellgrove yesterday, and he highlighted a Gartner Magic Quadrant estimate for field service management, where in 2022, the estimate is that more than 60% of asset manufacturers will offer outcome-based service contracts, and that's up from 15% last year. So huge potential shift, and we're seeing this shift in terms of users of LeveragePoint starting to put performance-based contracts in the tool and even monitoring them in the tool. So let's face it, this is new territory for many companies, but ex-post metrics have trade-offs, and it's important to realize that they have those trade-offs. They work best in long-term contracts when post-sale outcomes are more uncertain. That's about inducing the buyer to take risk potentially, where outcomes require performance by both buyer and seller. And again, that can help persuade a buyer that the seller's in it with them. They make more sense when the purchase decision is important for both because the contracting costs are usually high here. When the seller's offering is highly differentiated, then potentially there's upside for the seller in sharing in rewards. When the buyer has significant market power, there may be good news for the buyer in inviting the seller to share some of the downside. So we tend to see these things in these kinds of situations. And as with any kind of risk-sharing arrangement, it's important to evaluate ex-post metrics, that is risk-sharing pricing, with an eye on the two elements you see in insurance, adverse selection, or asymmetrical information, and moral hazard, where the behavior of a buyer is actually changed by shared risk. So not for all, but if you're in a situation where changing price metrics is a reason to package, that's now a situation where you're actually trying to introduce a new metric that you think is better. And in most of those situations, offering products primarily as a package, back to pure bundling, is the natural way to go, except possibly when a la carte offerings actually in and of themselves address a specific segment. The implications in terms of price outcomes vary among the customers when you're starting to change metrics, right? So package pricing with a better metric may mean that some buyers are paying a premium because you're capturing more of the value to them, and other buyers may be achieving a discount. Those are buyers who are buying where potentially you're capturing more market share. So a mixed outcome in terms of prices for the package versus a la carte. The last reason to package is cost synergies, where Henry Ford said, coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. So you may be talking about cost synergies in customer acquisition, by better account targeting, by better account management for retaining, upselling, and cross-selling. You may be looking at integrated service delivery and support, where it's lower cost and better coordinated to deliver implementations of a package, or to coordinate the ongoing services and support delivery for a package. And finally, there may be direct product and service cost synergies, where providing a service like maintenance may actually change the way the product is consumed, like equipment, where it has a longer life. So the implications when you have cost synergies as a reason to package, again, the efficiency is if you can get to packages primarily or packages only, where the end objective may be more likely to be pure bundling, and where it naturally makes sense with a package as you're coming up with those efficiencies, potentially to share some of that value with the customer. So here you may see some package discounting relative to what would have been a la carte pricing. The exception to that is when customer experience is actually improved, and you may be able to realize a higher price. So let's look quickly at an example. A company called Cygro, and we'll go through step by step for Cygro some situations where the last 4 reasons to package are being considered. And we'll do that in LeveragePoint, where we start with a display of the situation for Cygro. Cygro is a combination of businesses, and you'll see eventually we'll talk about not just products but services. And as a combination, they're selling both seed and herbicide, and we'll start there before we get to the services. So if you think about how they create value with those individual products, for example, when they're herbicide only, we're going to keep this analysis really simple. We're going to keep it at all of these, their products are better and their products are acting by increasing yield. So for example, if you think about value creation, there's a difference when seed and herbicide are combined versus when only herbicide is offered. So let's start with the situation with herbicide, and we're going to look at 2 kinds of farmers that they sell to, corn and soybeans, where they actually have some improved outcomes that they've measured in terms of yield. They're increasing, now those are different by the crop. So they have a 2.3% increase in corn yields and a 0.7% increase in soybeans. Right now there are no synergies, and they do have a better seed in both cases. But the interesting thing, of course, is the seed is actually sold. That's a corn seed, and that's soybean seed, where this is the same herbicide. So let's now look. They have a herbicide seed advantage, and the value driver is pretty simple to calculate, where for corn, what you're seeing is $15.27 per acre, but for soybeans, it's a different number, slightly less, just based on the different prices. And as you think about that pricing, here's a way to sort of look at the advantages. So with corn, what of course we have is a price per gallon, and that price per gallon is going to be the same to corn farmers as it is to soybean when you sell a la carte. This is one way to think of the advantage, where what we've got right here is a superior herbicide, at least in corn, and what we're looking at is a price premium. That price premium provides a yield advantage that's far greater than that price premium. So what you're really getting as a return, we call this incremental ROI, you're getting over 200% as your return at this particular price per gallon. Now, the problem is that may be very nice in corn, but in soybeans, what you'll also notice is that that's fundamentally different, because what we're facing in soybeans is a different competitor, at least in the herbicide. So a much different situation, so that if you price your herbicide at $1,000 a gallon, then the price premium means that buyers aren't going to buy there. So moving through that, then what we really have is a situation where what you might consider doing is moving to a system. So I'll move to my seed and herbicide system. And what I can think of relative to those a la carte prices, for example, is for soybeans and the soybean system, the combination of seed and herbicide, I might give them a discount of 10%, or I might even goose it a little bit more and give them 20%. And now, when we look at our soybean grower, what's happening is that they now have a reason to buy not only the seed, but the herbicide when they're buying it as a package. You can just as easily look at this in waterfall terms, and as you can see, the benefit of the system here for soybeans is you're seeing that in terms of the value to the customer per acre, just as you're seeing that for the value to the corn farmer per per acre. Okay. Next, we move along, and now we're in a world where a new seed is introduced, and this seed is different. This seed, both for corn and for soybeans, actually has synergies, where it's synergistic with Sygro's herbicide. And you'll see the amounts of these synergies, that is, the amounts that are added in addition to the standalone values, are shown here. Now, there's a lot of data here. And the first thing to realize is when you're thinking about communicating this, you really want to communicate it on a combined basis. So thinking about this, what you're out to do is see how you can get the most value out of this new situation. And one way to do that is, given these synergies, you might actually think about charging a premium price, for example, for the new corn seed that has these synergies. So I'm going to start with that. And again, I'm now thinking about the system, but the benefit here is I can look at this, and I can even consider, gee, maybe this discount that I had in soybeans before for the package, maybe I'm going to reduce it just because now I've got these synergies. So the realization here is that buyer synergies can allow for higher prices. And the more you're talking about these synergies, the less sense it makes to promote these a la carte. That the a la carte offering becomes confusing and distracting. So let's look at the next case study, which is now we're going to move to services. And Sygro buys an optimization service that uses data analytics to figure out how and when seeds should be planted and how crops should be treated using crop protection products. And it's interesting because the service results in higher yield. That yield advantage, and here's an important element, is per acre, right? And so this offering starts off when they buy the service that it's just it's subscription software, or it's a subscription service, where it's just charged per farm at a fixed price. So the interesting thing is when you start with a small farm, like 100 acres, what you've actually got is the price premiums more than the yield advantage. So there's no reason for a small farm to buy. And that's because you're charging per farm. Whereas for a larger farm, 500 acre farm, all of a sudden there's a lot more reason to buy it. So the service really is, it almost gets niched to larger farms unless you think about changing the price metric. And one way to change that price metric is to move from standalone per farm pricing to including it with the package solution. So now think about it this way, is when we move toward the package solution, regardless of the farm size, and if you're selling this as part of the package that's really being sold to serve, so many acres of corn being planted or so many acres of soybeans being planted, you're going to really have advantages that are independent of the farm size. So moving through this, there's a real advantage. So the final situation is to think about this in terms of cost synergies. So here's an example. What if Sygro's optimization services result in a 10% reduction in herbicide use? The availability of the service means that Sygro has the data and can forecast lower herbicide application in the season. Without a package solution, the farm gets all the benefit of the service. That is, that lower use of herbicide. And so what that actually means is there is some cannibalization of revenues. With a package solution, it's different because that reduction in the need for herbicide then means as Sygro is monitoring how much herbicide it needs to deliver, it can deliver less and it becomes a cost saving for them. So that's why with a package solution, it actually makes sense for them to share some of the benefits that they capture. Now, how do you think about all these taken together? Well, really the natural way is to begin to think about this in terms of what's going on in the market. You may have a potential addressable market that's so big in corn, so big in soybeans, and in setting all that up, what you're really looking to do is you're thinking about when do buyers buy, and you want to come up with some fixed and variable costs for each of the products. They're here. You may want to think simply in terms of at what returns or what incremental ROI, that's a good measure to use. People might buy a certain amount. And so you can really sort of think through your problem to get to some kind of thought process where you're comparing pricing and profitability. So here you see seed and herbicide a la carte, and you're seeing $4.3 million in operating profit. Where when you make the switch to a system, what you're doing, and we kind of saw this before, you're inducing those herbicide buyers who weren't part of your market before to now be buying herbicide. And you're increasing the profit by making that switch. Just as when you're thinking about all three elements, the seed, herbicide, and service together, you may have a lower operating profit because people pick and choose. It's horses for courses. Whereas the solution is really getting you to this higher level of 70.6 million, both because you're increasing demand, but also because you're able to employ different pricing tactics. So that kind of gives you some overall way to think about a frame of reference. So really just to get to the summary here, there are a number of reasons for package systems and solutions. And as you can tell, there are different results that we've highlighted as between whether you offer the package items, how you package price, and your communication. But a few implications. Mixed bundling is not necessarily the best strategy. Packages or bundles do not necessarily imply discounts. And when packages make sense, you really want to focus on communication on the packaged offerings. Because, you know, package and bundling is not necessarily always best. Jim Barksdale said it, there's only two ways I know of to make money, bundling and unbundling. And continuing to take a rational approach to evaluating this is important. So the reasons to unbundle, or the reasons to move back towards a la carte, are really largely about different costs to serve among customers. And they're about customers valuing elements of a package differently. In other words, these are actually two reasons that a la carte may actually help you segment better. So ending up in a package solution is not necessarily the only way to go. And what we do know is there may be some actual operating and management benefits by having different members of the team focusing on different elements of the package. So again, it's not always one way. Sometimes unbundling or sometimes going from package to separate offerings can make sense. And that's why doing the math is a really important thing. Because as you just saw, you want to first organize your products, quantify your value, identify your segments. Then, as you think about this framework, you want to segment value, identify costs and synergies, so that you can then design offers. And having designed different offers, compare profitability. So improve your offer design and execution for your differentiated products. Model, segment, and price to value, deliver your value propositions so that you can design better packages, price for higher profits, and sell packages effectively. Nick?
Thanks, Peyton, for sharing those insights. So we've had a few questions come in during the webinar, and there's still time for you to enter your question into the panel on your screen. As a quick reminder, while you're entering, please complete the 10-second survey while exiting today's webinar to be entered into the raffle for a copy of Dollarizing Differentiation Value. Now, to give you a couple more minutes into your questions, a few quick words on LeveragePoint. Peyton just walked through the ways that understanding and communicating customer value is key to great offer design. But why is customer value so important to B2B commercial teams? Well, according to Forrester Research, the first vendor to succeed in communicating a vision of value to executives wins the business 74% of the time. And that's where LeveragePoint comes in. We offer a SaaS solution, which you just saw in action, that aligns product, pricing, marketing, sales enablement, and sales teams around creating, capturing, and communicating value. How does it work? First, product, marketing, and pricing team members build custom branded value models and messages to create a value proposition that helps sales tell a story. They then publish that value proposition into a cloud-based library that is accessible by every rep at your organization to customize in real time for each customer's and prospect's needs. Finally, beginning with the first sales call, sales teams can modify the customer's baseline data in real time in order to create a unique business case to buy that the prospect can leverage internally to drive the deal forward. Early in the sales process, value propositions are useful as flexible case studies, building sales confidence, qualifying opportunities, and engaging customer executives. In the middle of the sales process, value propositions provide customer value analyses as an important consultative selling tool. In the purchase stage, value proposition becomes a shared business case to buy that serves as a buyer's internal financial justification to purchase and a sales team's asset and price negotiation. Now, who wins? Value propositions in LeveragePoint can be linked directly to an opportunity in Salesforce and can also be downloaded as a PDF and PowerPoint at any time for a personalized leave behind. On average, our clients achieve 5 to 15% higher closure rates and 5 to 25% higher prices when using LeveragePoint value propositions. And if you found any of that interesting or compelling, let us know in the post-webinar survey, and we can schedule a custom demo for you and your team. So now for the Q&A. So for the most popular one, yes, the webinar is being recorded, and yes, you will get the slides and the recording emailed to you within 2 business days. So we'll wrap that up and send that over as soon as the video is ready. So to go with the first question, Peyton, where do you start when evaluating a packaging strategy? How do you embed offer design in your current product development and product management practices?
So you can miss so much if it's just knee-jerk simplification. Start with value, and value comes from the C-suite. Value is when the CEO is presenting to Wall Street based on a new product being offered based on its value. Value is when product managers are routinely challenged in their product launch disciplines about what value they create and what their value-based segments are. Value is when product managers are challenged in their discipline. So really would urge you, start with value. If you start early enough, then you're moving forward so that your understanding of your customer is moving to how can I prove out my value at the time I launch or for next year. But it's also moving to what the differences are between customers and their value-based segmentation. And that begins to get you to some of the elements we saw in terms of segmenting and realizing synergies, segmenting and thinking about price metrics.
Great, thanks. I got another one here on stakeholder objections. So which stakeholder objections come up when packaging is introduced, and how do you get value into the offer design discussions?
Well, not to be too blunt, but the post-merger one's pretty clear. It's about turf. and unfortunately, that can be about throwing a couple product managers together and nobody really knows which end is up. Naturally, packaged solutions mean that where you once had 2 product managers or 1 product manager and 1 service manager, there's only room for one in driving the overall strategy. So put that aside because it's a standard post-merger issue. And I think the other objections that come up are really the ones that we highlighted earlier in the presentation. They're attitudinal. They're about thinking of this as just added up in a shopping cart, or they're about having specific attitudes that a package is a black box that you use not to collaborate with customers, but to deceive customers. So you've got to combat those attitudes all the time, and getting to that objective understanding of value can be really important as a way to combat that.
Okay, great. And I think we have time for two more. So we've got the sales one here. So there's been a lot of discussion today about the design of packaged offerings. What's the best way to execute on them from a sales standpoint?
Yeah, align your collateral with the focus packages. I do think this deliberate decision about what the strategic packages are is a really important one to help you then think about what the supporting evidence and what the natural issues are that a customer will face. So if your collateral starts off aligned with the packages, then your training moves that way. And as your training moves that way, it's also really natural to say, what's the right way to have a specific conversation with a specific customer? That's the value proposition. So at the end of the day, your value proposition is the basis for effective package selling.
Great. And I think I have one more that's a good one to close on. What are some real-world examples of B2B companies that have transformed their business with an improved offer design strategy?
Yeah, it's happening all around us. It's disruptive solutions. It's services companies that buy software companies. It's software companies that are developing services to get customer success. It's packaged solutions in healthcare, where a surgical suite may be supported with a whole solution rather than single products or single instruments or single implantable devices at a time. So I think it's everywhere, and I think we're going to see more of it.
Great, and then we're approaching the hour mark, so I think that'll be a great place to leave it. For those of you who have questions we didn't get to, we'll respond to them via email. And before you go, a reminder, pre-register for next month's technically webinar. This will be in first one of 2020. You can register during the exit survey. We'll be joined by Tim Smith. He'll be talking all about how quantitative tools like value propositions are used to drive sales performance and how they help overcome obstacles in the sales process. So we're really excited about that one, so make sure to pre-register. And that's it for us today. So thank you all for taking the time to join us for this webinar and everyone we've had this year. And a special thank you to Peyton for his insights. From all of us here at LeveragePoint, have a wonderful rest of your week and take care.